Good day, Gary Scott here, just to share my daily musings. So what I'm what I'm continuing to look at, and this has been through the word innocence, INNOSENSE. It's about our either lack or our coming into our senses. And a big part of that is looking at trauma in the body and how trauma either informs us or disinforms us. So a lot of times a response to trauma is our inability to connect with a part of our body. And I mean, I know that journey well because I've had some significant injuries throughout my life. And the more recent one was my right arm. And that was a process that I had to, well, I had a muscle completely torn. So a muscle that helps elevate the arm was torn in a way that it couldn't be repaired. And yet I have full range of motion and no pain. There's no restrictions because of, the way I was able to work with that, the way I was able to take care of that. Essentially the healing to me was a miracle. My doctor wanted me to go on disability. I mean, he saw that as, this was a life-changing event and we're not going to be able to walk that back, even with surgery, even with, other things. And I mean, ultimately the surgeon, after I did my work, he said, I don't want to touch it. This is like, you got full range of motion, no pain. It's like, go for it. I could mess something up. I could cut a nerve, I could damage something, it's a delicate structure in there. And I don't, it's not worth the risk. And I mean, that was refreshing to hear a doctor communicate that to me, that he didn't want to go in there. So I like that kind of support where we can have an honest dialogue about what's going on. And, it's also the no fix method. How do I take care of myself so that the wisdom of my body, my internal, ability, my cellular matrix, if you will, can take care of myself, can take care of, I mean, it takes care of the world naturally. We see that as things, restore after a period of time that because of what we've done, they've been broken down, but they find a way back. They find a way to return to wholeness. And so that's kind of where I want to go, is what's a return to wholeness? I talked to someone over the weekend that had an extreme anxiety issue. They were fine during the pandemic being at home working from their own computer, but they had to go back to the office. And the sense of anxiety was so potent that they felt it was very, very difficult to work. And the question that I brought up, and it's something that I've had to face in my life because I'm an ultra sensitive person, partly because traumas I had as a child, and so the body keeps the score, and yet you can move forward from there. And so I just proposed, I said, what if this is a gift and it's your body trying to tell you something? And I don't know that they could wrap their mind around it. And yet, I planted a seed because for me, I mean, I had major tinnitus. It's a ringing in the ear. And I mean, it was exacerbated by a toothbrush, Sonicare, and it would go off the charts. I mean, it became so loud and so unbearable, that it was difficult, really difficult. And then I learned as a healthcare practitioner to use, what I found was that when I hovered my hand over someone's body, the pitches would change. When I found especially when I found trauma in the body. When the fascia was locked up, there would be a much higher pitch. And as a practitioner, in the work that I do, I'm moving tissue, and I would get clarity around which way to move. So it wasn't like I had to ask a question, you know, my hands just went in the direction where they needed to go. And certain moves, it's like I knew I was supposed to hold it because of the move, you know, I would be in the process, and then the 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 spike and the tinnitus would go up higher and higher until it got to this crescendo, and then I released it. And so it was just this natural way of doing it. And that's what's incredible to me, is that, you know, when I could listen, my nature will teach me that the wisdom in my body, you know, I mean, that's what I really understand as a musician as well, is that the musical knowledge is stored in my body. So just take a moment to get that. The musical knowledge is stored in my body. You know, we have this relationship with our brain where we pack it full of knowledge. You know, we study and we learn these things mostly rote, and in other ways, some things just come to us more naturally. And what I've found, you know, it's like after you get your 10,000 hours in, you know, when you practice your butt off, just so to speak, you know, that there's this inherent wisdom in the body. And I work with all these different performers, and some of them are so creative, off the charts, you know, that I could never keep track of all the work that they're doing, or, you know, and, you know, I know I've linked up with them, you know, and this comes with people that I've known for a long time, and it comes with people that I haven't known for a very long time. I mean, that's what amazes me, is that connection point. So a quick little story back in my historical past, when I was in college playing my butt off, that I had a good friend named Evan, and he was a keyboardist, and we were both graduating that semester, and we'd played intensively for like 2 years in a band. And, you know, I mean, we really played a lot. So we knew each other, and also played, you know, I mean, one was in the context of jazz, another was in the context of improv. So we really had to find each other, you know, they're very different structures in how you work as a musician. And because of Evan knowing me, he had this senior study. It was an hour and a half of music that he had basically composed, you know, to show what he'd learned at school. And he was a favorite. He loved Thelonious Monk, you know, so there was this disjunct way of, you know, he loved that feeling that Thelonious Monk created through his music. And we got together and we played maybe 15 minutes and said, good, you know, here's the date, you need to show up, you know. And it's like, we didn't practice after that, you know. And then like a month later, we did this concert together. And I mean, I could just feel when he was going to start and feel when he was going to stop. And I could come right in, right on the moment, and leave right on the moment. And, you know, it was just, I mean, to me, it's delightful when you have that connection with someone else, and you can come in full bore and nail it, and then drop out when that needs to happen as well. And but that was a body sensation that I had. So that's another part of, you know, how we heal trauma. It's like, how do we reconnect those body sensations? Because a lot of times our traumas, they keep us up here, because this is what's absorbing, this is what's taking in all that information. This is what is, you know, helping us focus in the world. I mean, you know, the difference between the heart and the mind, you know, is a really important distinction for us, especially as spiritual beings. Because for me, it's like we came in this world, to learn to master the physical body. And so our journey into the world, can be really difficult, the birth process. So I was born prematurely and, in an incubator. And so it was like, it's been really difficult for me to scream all my life because I probably screamed my head off in those first days, not being with anybody, not being held by anyone. And, it's just what I have to relate to. I feel like, that doesn't affect me anymore because of my relationship with the world around me today. It's like I found a way to be complete in who I am and how I interface with the world around us. So the gift of trauma, how do we unpack that? Most of the time we're in avoidance. You know, when I got hit by a car at 8, you know, it was a difficult time for me. And, and I had physical I didn't look so good after that. And nobody wanted me around, you know. My family, the kids at school, I was I was ugly and healing, and it shut me down because it was like, I needed to hide because nobody wanted to see me. And and that and when I became a musician, it's like that was such an incredible gift for me to learn to express myself on stage with other people. And it was such a natural place for me to be, and such a healing for me to bring whatever it was that I brought to the moment, as a percussionist, as a drummer, that, I mean, that's still an incredible world for me to play in. And it's such an important part of my life force, how I'm able to express myself through music, through the various channels of music, because it's like improv is very different than jazz, or, from a singer that I work with that has very specific, songs. And I have to be in a very specific conversation with her for that to be recreated. And that's where I rely on my body. It's like I have to completely let go of my mind. I'd be a nervous wreck if I, kept on trying to figure it out. But I just have to let go. And that's when the magic happens. And that's what I look at, as a healthcare practitioner. It's like your body has the magic to heal itself, to take care of itself. What is it that gets in the way? And I see, as we are these human beings, in this world that we've created, this highly industrial world, that our interfaces are a lot more about what we have to do and a lot less about how we need to feel or how we feel. So we're in this mode, mostly prefrontal cortex, in taking care of what's around us. I have to get up, I have to go to work, or whatever that is, that lineage of, our day. And that's our relationship, as opposed to being a feeling body existing in the world and responding from that place as a feeling body. So to me, that's the magic of presence. How do I show up fully in my body, in a way, using the interface of my mind, to open the door for other people so that we can share space and inspire each other. I feel that's something that's really been lost. How do we continue to inspire each other? And that's where art and nature are so important, because they bring us back home. They bring us back into our physical presence in a way that can help us. So getting back to the gift, it's like, with my tinnitus, it's like it became a way for me to feel and read the world. It became incredibly valuable source, you know, for me to pay attention, to not be taken over by something, but to have a resource with it. So rather than this, oh, I got this ringing in my ears, it's like, wow, I can hear through my hands. How cool is that? So you get that sense of delight. And that's where, coming back to innocence, it's like, you know innocence is, as I'm changing the word form from INNOSENCE to INNO, I mean INNOCENCE to INNOSENSE. So we go from like a lack of something, a night, something that's naive, that's not knowing, to something that's like, I'm going to explore my senses here. And my senses are going to help communicate. So that the difficulty, that we have to parse out is the emotions that are, they're a part of our brain chemistry because of the way we were wired as a child. And so those emotions can be so overpowering. So, like looking at anxiety, there's something that goes on, that this loop gets started, and it's hard for us to see outside that loop, as opposed to just get into a sensation within that. And then let that sensation take us where we need to go. So it becomes less about the mind's ability, and it becomes more about the sense. So that this feeling tone is keeping us present. That's like the magic of tapping. That tends to re-coordinate us. It's about self-regulation. So self-regulation is our ability to not be overwhelmed by a nervous system. Whereas an emotion will hijack the nervous system, and it'll take us chemically, through our adrenals, through whatever, into a place, where we can't figure it out. We can't get out of it because we're stuck in a thought pattern. I call it a fractal of, some essence that happened in our childhood. And it doesn't allow us a way to escape. Whereas if we're, in the physical body, and we're keeping that lifeline tied, in a sense, then we're going to have a relationship. To me, it keeps us grounded. It keeps us aware and awake, because otherwise, like when we get in these emotions, it's hard for us not to check out, because that emotional element is so strong, and we either want to, fight it, or we want to hide from it, freeze from it. So that's the aspect of, when we get in freeze, we can't feel that. We can't relate to that. Whereas, like, it's just a sensation. Whereas when it's just an emotion, the emotion has a timeline with it. It's going to affect the adrenals in the body, and they're going to affect cortisol. All these things are going to play out because the brain has, gotten involved, and, it's filtering all these things, as opposed to, I'm back in the body again, I'm finding home, and whatever it is I need is always here. So I look at innocence from a place of stillness. Just taking a moment to tap into that stillness. Because your relationship with stillness is much different than my relationship with stillness. Because it's based, I feel, more from our perceptual abilities, which tends to be tied to our mind, as opposed to, the perceptual abilities of our body. We're never really trained in that. How do we feel from our body? Like, at one point in my training, I was with the organization and we had this whole textbook to work from. And one of our challenges, we did this as a group. And so getting everyone relaxed and then seeing from your heel, a part of the body that we don't really reference and from a sensation point of view. And yet, if we can learn to see from our heel, that'll give us a whole nother feeling, understanding of the world around us, looking at it from that lens. So, and that's where we get into sensation. I mean, that's where the meditative process, where mindfulness is like, just beginning to meditate, you're paying attention to perhaps the air going in and out of the nose. And so a good part of that is staying in sensation, not traveling with the mind. The mind wants to go all over the place. And eventually, as we work on our meditation, and there's different forms of meditation that create different experiences with that. And when we get to that place where we're able just to be in sensation, I mean, that's really what presence is all about. That I'm with you from my body, and my body's alive and awake to who you are. So you're more likely to feel my attention. And then the interface of our minds, I'm able to call back what you say so that you feel there's something I call hizzle, which is heard, seen, and loved. That's vital to who we are as human beings on this planet. It's like we need to be heard, so someone can just take the time to listen to us. We need to be seen. We need to physically be seen by somebody and acknowledged in that scene, and then heard. Well, heard, seen, and loved. Heard a second time, because hearing's so important. But the loved. And a good friend of mine sees love as, from the etymology standpoint, as joy together. And for me, it's that aspect of unconditional love. So that's a big part of my process, is how do I become unconditional with myself? How do I let, those mechanisms of emotion, of thought, that drive me in the world, how do I keep that relationship in balance so that I'm aware of the body? That's why I keep coming back to this tapping thing, because it's like that sense of self, it doesn't have the ego qualification of the mind. And what I mean by that is the sense of the ego is, we're all going to have a different relation to what is ego. But it's more about how, I need to be valued by something else, by someone else. And, it's about my material relationship in the world, or physical relationship in the world. And for me, the heart doesn't see the world like that. The heart just feels the world. It feels it unconditionally. And as a teacher, I worked with young children for many years, and it was like, how do I create this unconditional atmosphere, if you will? And the better and the more clear I could get on that, I mean, it was just, we had so much fun, and we got the parents to come in and have fun as well. Usually they would send the parents away. It's like, no, like family, we have to be together. And, that essence was incredible. I mean, it was such a gift for me, as well as the people that came to be in our classes, because it was everyone was valued for whatever they brought. And that's where, to me, it was like the children teaching us how to teach them. I mean, they were incredible. And when they would start to go down one path, we would help, to orchestrate that learning style or that learning path and find a way, So an example is we had these things called blue jellos, and they were wait for kids to see the notes, know how to qualify that, and so begin to read music, but from these simple little things called blue jellos. It's like a quarter note was, an eighth note was blue, 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 blue. Quarter note, jello, 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 you know. And so we just had a lot of fun. And these kids would put together these long lines, and I had to get this longer and longer stick so I could stand outside the circle, and they would read them, you know. And these are like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. They're reading music, and they loved, like, the rest sign was shh, you know. So we had a short rest, a medium rest, and a long rest, So like a whole, like a four bar rest, and there's shh, and they would start and stop. I mean, it was like amazing how, they taught us how fun that was, So that became a really important part, and the parents loved it, because it was like, we couldn't contain it. It went across the room. It went off the carpet. You know, the carpet was our, designated area. And the kids just loved that it didn't have any borders. You know, and so we would make these little packages. They would take them home, and they get to play with them. I don't know how many had their parents make more of them, but it was just like, it was so fun. It was like this little concept to help them to read music. It became something that they love to explore. So it's about that sensory exploration. How willing are we to let go of the frame of our mind and our mind's awareness, to just be immersed in something? Like swimming is one of those things. It's like we're so immersed in the water, and that does a certain thing to our body chemistry. I don't know. I probably covered a lot here, and I'm just getting started. So this is today's musing. It is Wednesday, December 6th, 7th. Oh my goodness, already. Thank you. Enjoy. Bye-bye.